So my name is Rob Fattel. I'm the co-president of the American Waterworks Association at Penn chapter, along with Sneh, who's also in this meeting. I'll make this quick. The American Waterworks Association is an international nonprofit that focuses on just improving water quality and supply across the world. And we're basically the Penn University section, and our goal is pretty much in line with theirs, but also to make the resources at the university in the water industry available to the students. So with that, I think we'll get started. I'll let Howard introduce himself, and then we'll go and have John present and Greg Cavallo after, and we'll field questions and have a discussion after.
So this is the time you'd like me to do about 5-10 minutes of talking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, thanks for taking charge of the AWWA section. AWWA is an organization that really changed my entire professional career. It saved me so many times, and I'll talk about that. But it made me sad that when I came to Penn, there wasn't any real water association connections with the university. And AWWA is a very special group. And if it's so easy to take yourself, be a little assertive, go to some of their conferences, hopefully sometime in the near future, and to learn and network and make friends. And if you want to be in the water business, that's the place to be. And it's so easy. And so we'll talk more about that, and I'm sure.
And they're great receptions, Howard.
The great receptions?
Yeah.
For which?
No, I mean, when AWWA is in Philadelphia, there'll be 7 or 8 or 10 just great receptions hosted by different companies that are.
It's incredible. Yes, you get well, depending on where you are in the business, you're either giving a reception, or you're hosting one, or you're participating in one as just an invited guest.
So incredible networking.
Yeah, incredible networking. So anyway, I'm Howard Neukrug. I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I graduated in 1978. Makes me very old. You guys are calculating. I'll just tell you. So I'm 64, and I've had a long career. And I majored in a major that unfortunately is no longer at Penn. It's called Civil and Urban Engineering. And when I got out, I had no idea what I wanted to do. No idea. So I was a civil engineer. So I went to some consultants. I went to this place, went to that place, and I had this safety that back at that time we called it, safety interviews. I don't know if they still do. My safety interview was with the city of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Water Department, and I interviewed there. And unlike all the other jobs, they offered me a hands-on job managing a $1 million project to improve drinking water quality in the city of Philadelphia at the age of 22. And you have to realize that in 1978, there practically was no masters of engineering programs. If you wanted to get a master's, you were getting a PhD, and getting a PhD, you were going to teach. Very few people in the engineering world went past the bachelor's degree. As a matter of fact, my graduate, when I got to Philly Water, a lot of the engineers did not have engineering degrees. They had math and physics degrees. So the world has really changed a lot since then. And I began there working out in the field and learning about water and water quality, and working really hard to become a technical expert. And that's going to be one of my key messages to all of you is I have not met a Penn student who doesn't want to do policy, but policy, everyone wants to do policy. So you have a lot of competition among your peers. You also have a lot of competition from people who look like me, who've been doing this their whole life and have some depth into the policy arena. And my strong recommendation is that you think about becoming technically proficient at something that gets your name around. And I did that with ozone, activated carbon, water treatment, taste and odor. And worked out really well. After about 10 years of being this expert, I was called into the commissioner's office, and he had all these top-notch people around him, and I was all nervous, and he introduced me as one of the top technical people in the world on these issues. And I sat there and I said, I don't want to be known as the technical guy. I want to be the policy guy. And that works really well when you're like turning 30 or so, to start to switch and become something a little bit different. And I got to the point in my career where, and continues today, if someone has a technical issue, they do not come to me because they don't think I can handle it, because they think of me more as a manager, policy person. But secretly, I know that I love the numbers and can still do that. But I went from staff engineer. I created an organization in Philadelphia Water called the Office of Watersheds, and did some really, really fun stuff that really helped to change the world. I ended up as the CEO and commissioner of the utility. I retired in 2016 and looked around, and I wanted to do consulting. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to work internationally, and many other things. And oh, okay. And I wanted to be a professor of practice. But the thing I really wanted to be was I wanted to create a water center at the University of Pennsylvania. And lucky for me, I was able to do that. And with that, I'm really doing like all those things I wanted to do. All the doors are open. And I work for an international company that puts on conferences on global water, and I lead a group of CEOs from 50 different countries on how to make innovations and make things better. I have my own personal consulting business where I do work in Pittsburgh and some other cities, and I teach, and I run the water center. And so it's kind of, never wrote the book, but I've a lot of the other things I've really accomplished, and I'm really, it's been a very happy career, and never spent a day without learning something new. Because when you do that, that's when it's time to leave. I'll stop there. Was that is that what you wanted from me? Now that, okay.
That was great.
That's what you get.
So I guess if that's all, I mean, we can ask Howard questions in the session.
I can talk more. I can talk a whole hour. Well, all right. So the water business, you got a couple of very key people here. You got John Freedman. He's been with the technology side and the political lobbying side of this business for a long time. Greg is here. I'm looking for his face. Oh, there he is. Okay. Greg's here. He's been working with the DRBC. I think he also worked there for most of his career, retired, and now is an excellent consultant who's working with the Water Center. And there's just so many different ways to look at this and to be a water person, because the water person means something different to everyone. It's water is a universal connector. You can work on the waterways and improving the beaches, improving the rivers and streams, which is what I like to do. And the connection between cities and water is very tight. I mean, water, there's so much opportunity as a city planner, landscape architect, an engineer, public affairs, finance, construction, engineering, planning, research. There's a million different areas to get into in the water business, and it's really looking for people like you. I mean, it's a tough business because water is not a commodity like oil and gas are. So there's not as much money in water, and there's not as much, may not even be as much salary in water as oil and gas. But boy, it's a totally different world because you're working on issues that are really dealing with the climate change and how you're going to respond to it, and resilience of cities, and so many other things that give many of you, not I wouldn't say everyone, but most people in the younger generations who are especially interested in working in the water field. There's just so many opportunities out there. And when I created an Office of Watersheds in this old Philly Water Department, which has 2,000 employees and has a lot of engineers who are designing pipes, and have a lot of old white men, look like me, working there as engineers and whatever else. What we found was that when I opened this Office of Watersheds with 5 people and these great ideas of drinking water source protection and green cities and preventing pollution going into the river, suddenly we had all this interest from young professionals starting out who wanted to do something with their lives and wanted to work in this kind of field. And today we have 125 people in that office, and it's pretty miraculous, and it's pretty young. It's probably getting older now, but it's low 30s is the average age of people in this office, and and we're coming to work, and you can change the world, and so it's really nice. And people are taking these jobs where government jobs may not had in the past been the place where the top professionals would go. Now we're seeing that that's really changing, because it's the place where you can really get your hands on something and make a difference. I'll stop there and pass it on to John.
Well, thanks, Howard. And for a guy who never intended to have a career in the water industry, you've had a great career and become kind of a famous guy. So I'm glad you started the Water Center at Penn. That's been good for everyone. So I'm based in DC, and I lead government affairs for a company called Suez. Howard mentioned it. Suez is one of the world's leading water treatment companies. It has 90,000 employees in 120 countries. And it's also headquartered in Paris, which makes it kind of fun. Excuse me. So I graduated from Wharton. I'm not as old as Howard, but close. And I had an MBA in finance. And I went to work for a real estate developer in Hawaii. And then I moved to its headquarters in California. And then after a couple of years, this company went bankrupt. And it was a front page story in the Wall Street Journal. It said, 90s real estate developer goes from boom to bust. And I was out of work. So in those days, Howard will remember this, I think, but if you wanted to get a job, there was no internet. You literally read a newspaper, you looked for ads, you wrote a letter with a resume, and you waited, somebody wrote you back and said you can come in for an interview. And so I answered that in the Wall Street Journal for a job at a real estate developer headquartered in New Jersey. And that real estate developer ended up being owned by a big water company called Suez. I went there, and after a couple of years doing real estate development in northern New Jersey, well, it was a national company, but I was based in northern New Jersey. I was selected for, they called it the Senior Leadership Program. And they selected 10 employees in North America to groom for kind of general management responsibilities in the company. And they asked me kind of what I wanted to do broader than real estate. And I said, well, you don't have a presence on I wanted to get back to California. So I said, well, you don't have any presence on the West Coast. I'll open an office in LA. And so I did. And after a couple of years in LA, I was selected for something they called the Global Leadership Program, the Suez, the parent company. And they wanted to exposed me to an international career. So I moved to Paris, which was the headquarters. And while I was working in Paris for Suez in the strategy department, now I'm a few years into kind of working in the water industry, which just kind of happened randomly. GE called and said, we don't have a water business, but we want to create one. We'd like you to come in and create a strategic plan for GE to enter the water industry. And I said, I'm not interested. Thanks very much. And then a second person from GE called back. It was the person I ended up working for, and said, look, we can't find anyone for this role. You're the perfect profile. What can I do to convince you to take this job? And I said, well, I've always told my wife that someday we'd end up in Charlottesville, Virginia. And by the way, my wife grew up in Charlottesville. Her father was chief of infectious disease at UVA. And he's actually friends with Tony Fauci. And, infectious disease has become a really famous discipline. It didn't always used to be that way. But so this guy said, look, done. And so literally 2 weeks later, I moved from Paris to Charlottesville. And then I spent 17 years at GE, and I did three main things at GE. One is I led the acquisition of a global water company that got renamed GE Water. And then I spent a year at GE corporate headquarters, where I led the creation of something called Eco-Imagination, which was GE's global sustainability initiative. And then I moved to Washington, D.C., where I am now, and became the global government affairs leader for GE Water and for GE's nuclear business. So that was kind of my career path. And then 3 years ago, Suez bought GE Water, and I went back to Suez. So, when I look at my career, I certainly never intended, Howard's offline, but there he is. But, he said he never intended to go into water. He just kind of ended up taking a job that offered him the most responsibility kind of right off the bat. And in my case, I never really thought about what industry I was going to work in. I just I was driven by geography and using the skill set that I wanted to use. And it just kind of led me to a career in water. So that I'll just stop there, Rob, and I can answer questions later or whatever you guys want.
Yeah, that'd be great. But I was thinking maybe quickly you could discuss your role with the water reuse organization.
In water reuse, sure. So I have three roles for Suez today. Suez is a $20 billion company. I'm the Suez representative in the U.S., Washington representative. So I'm the ambassador from Suez to the World Bank and other multilateral organizations headquartered here in the U.S. Second, I'm the global government affairs leader for Suez Water Treatment Technology business unit, which is headquartered just outside Philadelphia. And third, I'm the government affairs leader for Suez North America, which is basically a water utility here in the U.S. And in those capacities, I participate in a number of different organizations. Howard mentioned AWWA, and I know you guys are the local chapter. It's a great association. I'm a member, but I'm also on the board of two other organizations. One is the Water Reuse Association, which is promotes water reuse, of course, and I chair the policy committee. And then the second is the International Desalination Association, and it's headquartered in Rome, and it promotes desalination, water reuse, and advanced water treatment globally. And it's an affiliate of the United Nations. I forget the exact terminology, but a recognized, partner of the United Nations. So I work a lot with multilateral organizations like the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, and the United Nations, the World Economic Forum. I'm the Suez representative to the World Economic Forum here in the US. And I don't know, so I have a mix of kind of US-based responsibilities and global responsibilities, but all towards engaging for Suez to kind of position Suez as a thought leader globally and to push for policies that will help grow Suez's business. And generally speaking, those are policies that promote sustainability, because the stricter the standards for treating water, the more technology that businesses and communities buy to treat that water.
Great. Greg, do you want to start your presentation?
You want me to follow that, huh? Okay. I think I'm somewhat similar in my evolution to John. When I'm sitting there where you are right now, many years ago, and wondering what to do. What am I going to do with my degree? How am I going to pursue something that's fulfilling and satisfying? And it's difficult to say where to go, but there are many opportunities. So I've been asked to look at opportunities, government, non-NGOs, and industry. And I put a little PowerPoint together. If I could go to that, I kind of would like to, because I have, I think, key points in there that you might want to take with you.
For sure. Why don't you share your screen?
Okay, I'll share. Okay, how about we do that? Do you see it?
No.
Oh, let's try again. How about that?
Oh, there. I think we're getting it. Yeah, perfect.
So you have the introduction. I appreciate the ability to speak to you, because, like I said, I've been there, and I've been asked to talk about opportunities for government, NGOs, industry, some of the emerging issues that are facing the environmental field, at least from my perspective and the water quality perspective, and some of the skill sets. And Howard was nice enough to say, hey, Greg has been helpful to the Water Center. I have 25 years in ground and surface water hydrology and environmental chemistry with the commission. Before that, though, there was I guess, as John had mentioned, we go through a couple different iterations of in our profession. I was originally with private industry. I worked for the USGS Geological Survey in Denver, Colorado, and another NGO before coming to the DRBC. But the focus is on water quality. And as a member of the DRBC, I was, and as Howard alluded to earlier, you get a lot of responsibility early on in some organizations, and that can be a lot of fun. The commission has regulatory oversight over ground and surface water, including quality issues. So the commission was looking for a geologist to take over the management of the southeastern groundwater protected area. And that was most of the counties surrounding Philadelphia that in the 1980s or 1970s and 80s, a number of people had emigrated or left Philadelphia for those areas and created some issues in terms of water supply. At that time was mostly groundwater derived. And so the commission instituted regulations for withdrawals as well as its existing discharge criteria. I assisted with the development of numerical groundwater limits, which was kind of the first in the country. I didn't do it alone, obviously. We did it with the USGS, and that was very successful. The number of interferences, the ability to supply on a regular basis without outages improved, interconnections improved, as John can probably tell you, given the water source supplies. But most of my career has been spent with emerging contaminants, and PCBs, while not new emerging, were relatively emerging back then. And we worked on a TMDL, which is the total maximum daily load for the river, because the fish were contaminated. And as such, you had to come up with a way to reduce that contamination. So involved in the hydrology, calculating the stream flow values, the loadings from those stream flows, sample collection, the whole thing, including at the end, the project management for the implementation, which gets to the nuts and bolts of what I do. I assist in data collection, management, interpretation, and then apply some of the policy decisions. Where are the opportunities? And I'll be very brief about this. If you're a geologist, hydrologist, environmental scientist, there are a ton. There are a ton. It starts with government positions, and you start at the federal level, US EPA. You can start with USGS. Interstate, there's the DRBC, the SRBC, or SANCO. State, every state has a DEP. And local, there's the water, Philadelphia Water Department. There are municipal, local organizations, usually at city level. Then NGOs, you know, we all know the Delaware River Keeper Network, but there are many others like it and even bigger. And then there's industry. Suez is one, Essential Utilities, American Water, you name it, are the big industries from the water purveyor perspective. Then there's basically large manufacturing, water use and water discharge facilities. And then ultimately, for those that don't have it internally embedded, you have consulting organizations to assist those. So I just mentioned it. US EPA has the requirements for the Clean Water Act, and that ensures safe drinking water. And that is crucial. And that's their role. And they do it through the issuance of NPDES permits and PDES permits, National Pollution Discharge Elimination. It's your passport to discharge, and you have to follow certain rules. Department of the Interior, as I said, USGS, Division of Water Resources, you know them best for their stream monitoring in terms of gauging, but they also do water quality. They do biological assessments for fish. They do aquatic biotic assessments. They have a biological division, which is relatively new. It's really kind of, you know, what they do. And for the rest of you, or how do I put it? We have an East Coast centric focus here. There's U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which is kind of interesting, again, with the Department of Interior, but they're basically known for their dams and their power supply in the West. And they have requirements for releases for biological impairment, to remove biological impairment, improve it. So they're a big, how do I put it? They're a big employer of geologists, hydrologists, biologists, wetland specialists, you name it. Then we have the Army Corps of Engineers, who does the dredging, but they also have a mandate for cleaning up remedial contamination from past military facilities. And that's huge. That's just huge. And then there's the interstate agencies, you know, the Delaware River Basin Commission. I'm rather fond, actually. But it has a lot of regulatory authority for water quality and quantity. SRBC is more a water quality organization, but they have monitoring programs. They have data collection that they provide to the state. Orsanco is similar. It's the Ohio River Valley Sanitary Commission. Again, these things are all relatively new, span more than one state, and have a technical staff that is focused on that mission, water quality and quantity. It's really kind of very interesting. Then obviously you have the state DEPs, New York DEC, Pennsylvania DEP, DNREC, which is Delaware Natural Resource Environmental Control. They implement some of the US EPA water quality regulations, and they have engineers, they have geologists, hydrologists, they have chemists, they have biologists. I mean, when they go in and do site oversight, they need to look at it from a holistic perspective. And then you've, as was Howard mentioned, the water department and you know, PWD, some of the bigger cities and some of the really large MUAs might have a department. NGOs on the same scale on a national level, there's the Nature Conservancy. I hope you guys have heard of them. They've been around for a long time. And I've worked with them in the past, and they've been really good at partnering with government agencies and other NGOs to achieve goals. One of the programs I worked on was in-stream flow needs for fisheries. They were excellent. They basically came up and says, look, you know, we're looking at this from a perspective of, is there enough flow during seasonality changes for reproduction and for maintenance or other criteria? And so they were very good at bringing diverse elements together and adding their own expertise. Then you've got the watershed agencies, Delaware River Keeper Network. The same thing occurs in New York and Chesapeake. Delaware River Keeper Network, to put this in perspective, the number of people on staff there almost matches the DRBC. So don't underestimate these watershed agencies as potential employers. It's you want to do something with your life. You really want to say, hey, I want to really help. A lot of these places have a very wide agenda. You'll get a lot of responsibility and you'll get a lot of exposure. So don't sell short. And then there's the local ones, the Wissahickon Valley watershed, the Broadhead up in the Poconos. I think the Pennypack has one. They're not particularly big, but I believe they have some staff online. Not to get into too much detail here, environmental consulting is probably one of the other big ones. You have a lot of organizations. You got AECOM, you got Tetra Tech, you got you've got Golder Associates. What you can't do as an organization that is either required by regulation or is part of your policy and your environmental mission, and you can't do, you hire a consultant to do it. Supply, quality, including toxicity and emerging contaminants. There's remedial companies, which is a big piece of it. Everything to biological and wetlands impacts. And for those industries that are big enough and in compliance with their NIPDs, they hire people. Matter of fact, most of our interns, or I say our, and I meant our former interns at Delaware River Basin Commission, have gone on to get jobs either in government with the USGS, coupled with the Army Corps of Engineers, but a lot of them with industry. And, you know, they are looked at as the enemy sometimes, but I always thought of them as the first line of defense, because a lot of them, I think that the background they have are similar to ours. They're environmentalists. They're trying to figure out, you know, how do I meet these requirements and you know, improve things. You know, power generation has non-contact cooling water. Well, you have temperature requirements when you discharge it. You also have flow requirements, influent velocities, because you don't want to impinge and entrain, you know, fish spat, fish larvae, and things like that. That's true for all of these, including, you know, the manufacturers, refineries. Every one of these has an environmental group. And if not, they go to environmental consulting. But the bigger ones usually have some environmental group. And just to wrap this up, emerging issues. You've heard of PFAS, but you lump it under contaminants of emerging concern. And these are things that may have been out there for a while, but they haven't been regulated. They don't have maybe toxicity data associated with them. Maybe they don't know something about them, so there can be a water quality criteria developed for them. They usually come through wastewater treatment plants. They can be through process from production, industrial production. They can be definitely from landfill leachate. They're all over that. But, you know, you got the PFAS, the polyperfluorinated alkyl substances. You know, New Jersey's probably at the forefront of that with regulation for 3 compounds, PFOA, PFOS, and PFNA. Pharmaceuticals and personal care products, that's something that the commission kind of, I didn't say pioneered, but was an early adapter, looking at metformin, looking at codeine, looking at, you know, some of the compounds that are in the water from human intake, digestion, and then discharge. You know, personal care products, you get, you know, sunscreens, fragrances, things like that. You know, and then don't forget the historical contaminants. You know, PCBs are still there. They're going to be there for a while, and they were outlawed. Production was outlawed 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago. Dioxin furans are still there, combustion byproduct. Mercury and lead, the other metals, selenium, zinc, copper, lead. It's there. There is a whole suite of compounds. Do yourselves a favor, and I don't want to be long-winded about this. Develop some statistical robustness or chops. And I'm going to shout out to Saffron and her Python skills. But, you know, develop R, develop descriptive statistics, fine. Regression analysis, yeah. But how about non-parametric? Because most things in the environment aren't normally distributed. Trend analysis, Mandel-Ken approaches, significance testing. Understand how you would statistically address a question you may have. Is this data set different than this? Is it long-term trend? how do I look at something that's not normally distributed? I can't emphasize that enough. Field experience, and who was saying field experience? Was it John? It's fun. You learn a lot by being in the field because you're closer to your data that way. You understand the nuances. You're in the field long enough, you become a project manager. That's great because then you're responsible for everything. Quality assurance project plans, and the sampling and analysis plan. QAP is, everything from stating the problem, laying out the process, identifying the analytical methods, the data quality objectives, you name it, that's the way to go. And learn, I guess you guys have to take at least one semester of organic chemistry. I'd suggest more, including how things decay, how things partition, really good partitioning background, and then get an understanding of analytical methods. And there's lots of help with that. Standard methods is one of the approaches, one of the references that are always used. And then you heard it before, internships, AWWA, publish your thesis if possible, publish lots of sections of your thesis if you can do it. Join organizations. Remember, use people like John and Howard as resources. And I'll leave you with this final thought. It's the beginning. Your degree is the beginning. I learned more than I ever learned in school. And you have to, because you're going to read and you're going to learn and you're going to experience. So thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I apologize if I got a little long-winded. Did I just get out of this?
Nope.
Okay, oh, there I am. I'm sorry.
You have to stop sharing the screen.
Can you stop it? Yeah.
Greg, you were doing great till you got to the organic chem and statistics part.
Why?
Because I don't know. You don't really, depends what part of the water business you go into.
That's true. But what I find the weakness in a lot of these people, it's like, you need to know a little bit more. And maybe you will learn that on the job. Howard, I defer to you. You may not need it up front, but you may learn it on the job. It's just so nice when you're in school. My God, take advantage of it. Yeah,
that's true. I never learned it. I got away with it, but boy, it would have been better if I learned it in college.
I'm a self-taught statistician. That's why I mentioned it.
Well, thanks for those presentations to our speakers. This is a real treat, guys. We have 3 really distinguished experts with very different backgrounds. So I guess now we'll open it up to questions. And to kick it off, I have a question for John, who once told me about a book called "Don't Send a Resume," and I'd like him to elaborate on that and the advice that he has and that he gleaned from it.
Yeah, I just recommended that book, Rob, to my nephew this weekend. There's this book, it's called Don't Send a Resume by Jeffrey Fox, and it's out of print. So I think you can buy it on Amazon for $1.50 or something. Rob, what did it cost you? Did you buy it? Oh, anyway, the essence of this book is when you're looking for a job, it gives you a cookbook approach to doing it that really, I think, is very effective. And it says, don't tell them about yourself and what you want. When somebody's going to hire you, they're going to pay you money, and they want to kind of understand how you can help them make more money than they're going to be paying you. And I'm sure there are exceptions to that rule, but by and large, that's the rule. And so if somebody says, hey, tell me about yourself, you don't want to say, oh, well, I love running, and I always wanted to live in Paris, and I know this job's in Paris, so that's really great. And you just say, hey, I have 4 years of experience studying this discipline. I've really learned it well. I can step right into your organization and do this right away with no ramp up time, and I'll really help you, blah, blah, blah. So it just helps you frame your thinking and preparation for job interviews, and also has a whole section on how to network to find job opportunities without just sending, cold, well, in those days, letters, now emails or whatever to random employers. So I really recommend it to all of you, and I've found it to be incredibly useful over the years.
And John, if I just add to that, there's a lot of the students graduating who are looking on the internet for that first job, and it's really hard to get a job that way, because you're competing with the internet world of people, and it's so it's a little bit harder, but I think it's more rewarding to, do that networking, get around to meet folks, understand what kind of business, research the different types of businesses you can be in, and focus on 1, 2, 3 different things, and network. And through that, and a number of you on this call have spoken to me a number of times about job opportunities, and that's how you get them. I mean, you can call me up and say, I'm looking for a job, blah, 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 and I'll probably say, there's nothing I have right now, but it stays in your mind, especially, if you make an impression upon.
And Howard, I would just add to that do it judiciously. First of all, don't be afraid to do it, because that's the key to success. But don't do what my nephew did, which was send me an email on last Friday just saying, hey, John, I want a job in Washington. First of all, I'll say Uncle John. And I want a job in Washington. And would you just introduce me to your network of congressmen and associations? And, he listed like 5 different categories of people. So first of all, I know thousands of people, like, you'll know that you know probably hundreds, if not thousands now yourself, and it just keeps growing. And second of all, it's just a huge overreaching ask. So I did have a conversation with him. So what do you want to do? Like, are you interested in the environment? Are you interested in, because that'll depend on who I might introduce you to. And I'll pick a handful of people to kind of get you started with. Second, when you do speak to people, be direct. I mean, don't be offensive, right? But be direct and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. Not necessarily with you, but I'm hoping somehow you might be able to help me. So they know what's going on. I've had people call me and talk for an hour, and I kind of suspect they're looking for a job, but it's not clear to me. And I'm like, well, what are we talking about? Like, why? They just, well, tell me more about your career, So don't keep people on the phone for an hour, but be kind of frank with them so they know what you're up to. But absolutely ask them if they if they can advise you. Almost everyone will be happy to do that. Second, if they can think of others you might speak to because you are looking for a job. Those are my thoughts, Howard. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but.
No, I absolutely. And it's even for your closest allies, like your children, what I tell them is, I can get you an interview, but I can't get you a job. Getting the job is once you make contact, you're on your own, and you have to use a whole bunch of your talent.
Well, that book, Rob, Don't Send a Resume, also helps you prepare for interviews, because it helps you anticipate. It's basically, you need a game plan whenever you're going to speak to somebody. So anticipate what questions they're going to ask you, have crisp answers. Don't just ramble, like state your answer and then just shut up. Mm-hmm. And then also think of intelligent questions to ask them, because that's how you differentiate yourself, by asking smart questions. And also, I would just add, showing up is 90% of the game, because a lot of people never reach out. And I'll always remember this. When I was just coming out of Wharton, I had this one interview with this investment bank, and the guy said, you sent me a letter, you asked me if you could speak to me, and you followed up with a phone call a week later. He said, I take letters from people, I hold them for a week. If nobody contacts me, I throw them out. If somebody contacts me, I meet with them. And I always stuck in my mind, like, I didn't know that guy, how he viewed the world, but, follow up. It's not going to hurt.
And not to add to that, but early is on time and on time is late. It's just one of those things. You want to show a little bit of enthusiasm. So be there a little bit early just in case and show that kind of enthusiasm. But I think the personal connection is the best. It's always been for me. And even given the internet now, you're competing with everybody across whatever the world. I mean, the marketplace is huge. There may be a job in Colorado or Washington or Paris, and you're competing with hundreds, if not thousands. And it's hard to differentiate yourself when somebody uses an algorithm to look at your resume and picking out topics and giving you points per topic. That's hard.
Questions, anybody?
Howard, I have a question for you.
Where's that coming from?
This is Alex.
Oh,
So you mentioned developing technical expertise, and I was wondering if you could give us a little perspective on maybe some areas that you interact with, like technical areas or specializations kind of that you've come into contact with recently, kind of as the water market stands now.
you were asking me, well, I'm looking right at Greg Cavallo, who the Board Sector just hired, with his expertise, very much around, contaminants in rivers, and we're doing projects on that, and so that comes in a very obvious thing. And I don't know if I'm answering your question here, but my thought is that you're laying the groundwork for yourself for a very long career, and you need to show yourself. And to me, I think the easiest way to show yourself is with becoming an expert in something, being able to put together a presentation, back in the old days, putting together a presentation, going to a conference, and then doing the networking from there. Somehow, particularly with organizations like AWWA and other organizations, probably one of the more interesting things that I always did when I went to AWWA conferences, the national conferences, not the local conferences, the national ones once a year, is they all have these committees. It sounds really boring, but they all have these committees. They have a committee on biosolids. They have a committee on energy, committee on activated carbon. I mean, whatever it is, there's a committee on it. And if you go into those rooms, you won't really find a lot of really boring people. You're going to find some of the smartest people in the industry who are sitting there talking with each other. And there may only be 5 or 6 people in the room. And you may want to sit around the edge at first, but getting to know those people is an incredible way to take what your interests are and immediately network with the top of the industry. And I see that all over, and it's really helped me out incredibly during my career, particularly from probably year 10 to year 20 of my career.
Great, thank you.
I had a question for John. So I think I'm curious, since you mentioned General Electric and their interest in water, if you could specify more about what that interest was. I know you also mentioned nuclear for them. Is that their primary reasoning for wanting access to water?
Well, it's a really good question, Leslie. So when I joined GE, they had one of the world's largest power generation business units. They probably still do, although that industry has been suffering recently. And what happened is that every time they'd build a power plant for a customer, the customer would say, "Oh, well, what about the water to run this? To cool the turbine, or if it was a steam turbine to run the turbine." There were tremendous, connections between water and energy, and GE just said, "Well, we don't do that." So they kind of said, "Well, we should probably enter the water space. There's so many connections between energy and water." Then they started thinking about it, and well, look, if you look at desalination, Howard, how much of the cost of a desalination plant is energy? 50% or 60%, depends on the plant. So there, connections on both sides. So they hired me to come in and help them think through what all those connections were, map out the entire global water industry, the value chain. And then under that value chain, so you have chemical companies and engineering firms, which Greg mentioned, and equipment companies and operating companies that operate water utilities. And then under each of those links in the value chain, identify who all the players were and what their profitability characteristics were. And then GE just wanted to say, well, let's look for those pockets of profitability, technology, and service. Those are the three things we're looking for. And then within those, identified, I don't know, several hundred prospective acquisition candidates. I rank ordered them and contacted them in priority order. And what I did was I just picked up the phone and called the CEO of each company and said, hi, I'm John Freedman from GE. We're interested in whatever. And every single person I called at least invited me to come in and meet with them. And actually a fair number of them were interested in discussing, either joint ventures or a sale of their business unit to GE. So that's kind of how it all played out.
Thanks. And I imagine many companies have that same view at this point.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think there are a lot of companies that do energy and water together these days.
So I have a little story. So I was doing a Engineers Without Border presentation, something like this, but I had slides, so I wasn't all over the place. And it was in the chemistry building, room 101, the big one, and it was filled with students. And at the end, a whole bunch of students came down and they plopped their resume on the big desk there. And I'm going, wow, this is pretty incredible. And picked them up, put them in my bag. I walked out of the room, and most of the kids had left already. But this one guy comes up to me and says, that was a really great presentation, Professor Neukrug. And he says, do you mind if I take a picture with you? And he's with some friends. He gives his friends his pictures, his camera or whatever it was, and comes over, puts his arm around me, picture's taken, and he says, thank you. And I walk away, think, what the hell? What is this guy doing? The next day, I got an email from him, and he said, I really enjoyed your presentation. If you don't remember me, look at the attachment. There's a picture of me with you. And that really worked. I mean, that just made such a connection of who a person is through a process like this. And, it's very valuable. So sometimes you just have to get out of yourself, because we're all people. The last thing John or Greg or I want to do is sift through 1,000 resumes. What we want to do is suddenly we have a job open, the first thing we do is think about who do we know is looking for a job that fits this perfectly, so that we don't even have to go out and advertise this.
Well, Howard, I can make an announcement here just spontaneously. So Suez is looking for a chief digital officer for its global water treatment technology business, which is a multi-billion-dollar business in probably 120 countries, just like the parent. I don't know if that's appropriate for anyone on this call, but maybe you know somebody, or maybe you're interested. So that's a new position, which is kind of like to, create software and combine software and sensors and everything else, and try to kind of make water systems, both municipal and industrial, operate more efficiently.
I'd suggest Robert talk about how he's been conniving, getting this all together, creating this program, and talking to me and to John. And I don't think you knew Greg before, so but, you're working the system, and you got a nice internship right now. You're a perfect example of what you should be doing.
Well, thanks, Howard. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy. I'm just, like John said, I'm not afraid to reach out and embarrass myself a little bit, which I've done more than once. One of the great things about Penn is we have all these resources, and people like John, Howard, and Greg are more than happy to talk to us. So, even if it's just a conversation, but about what you can learn. I think, you know, just developing a relationship that's the first step. But yeah, does that answer your question, Howard?
Okay, I'll settle.
Okay.
Well, where are you working now?
Oh, so yeah, I work for one of the commissioners of Miami Beach, who chairs the Land Use and Sustainability Committee. And I write briefings for him on various stormwater and other infrastructure projects related to sea level rise and mitigating the risks of like coastal flooding. And the way I got that was I just sent the guy an email and told him that my internship over the summer was canceled. And he said, you can work for me for free, but you know, you got to prove yourself. And so I worked hard and I've been working for him since.
Great. Yeah, free is pretty good if you can do it. No one likes to see anybody working for free. So eventually, if you're good, they'll pay you, because it's, you know, you can't even look at somebody who's working in the office and not getting paid. And it happens. And it happens for good reasons and things that benefit both the employee and the employer. But you know, you stick with it and you make an impression. It's a good way. It's a good way in.
Hey, Howard.
Mhm.
I think, you know, you get asked by students or even non-students all the time to help them find jobs. And I would just say the more prescriptive you can be when you speak to somebody, the better, because like, don't do what my nephew did, right? Like, introduce me to everyone you know. Like, that's a meaningless request. But if you say,
Yeah.
hey, this is the geography I want to be in, this is the, you know, specific kind of role I'm interested in and why, you know, it's just anything you can do to kind of put some boundaries up and make it a more actionable request to the person you're asking, more likely you are to get results.
Right. Because, you know, if you call me up and you start talking to me, and you know, first thing I'd have to do, and Greg's work is very different from John's work. So the first thing in my mind, just in this little world here, is who would you send them to? How would you even make a decision of, you know, this person's career? That oh yeah, I really want to help you, I'm going to send you to Greg. Meanwhile, you know, your real thinking is really much more towards working for a Suez type company. Can we recognize Tony Souter on the call here? Because he's here. Hopefully he's not looking for a job, but he could very well have been a fourth talking head here about this. I'm sure you have something you'd like to add to all this.
Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't join in the beginning. I certainly knew about it, but I actually had to talk about one of my courses and I couldn't get that schedule moved. So sorry I didn't get to hear all the distinguished talks. I really don't have anything to add to what I've heard. I mean, it's been excellent. You know, again, it's really hard to do virtually, but some kind of personal connection with whatever you're pursuing works. And you know, being a little bit persistent is good. Obviously, you don't want to wait. You know, if you're not getting any response, you don't reach out 3 times. You know, but certainly do 2, and or if you're waiting a long time for a response, you can check in again, because I'll tell you that I have inquiries from students and others, you know, whether it's a recommendation letter or some job opportunity, and sometimes I really intend to get back, but I just miss getting back, and so having a little reminder is okay, and it shows me that the person really wants to do that. So not much more than that.
I'll pose a question. So I guess for Howard, Tony, John, and Greg, could you talk a little bit about professional licensure or the PhD route as a technical kind of advisor? What's most useful? What, I guess, in a changing water sector? what do you think is the most valuable?
Well, to me, it's, and I really recommend, if you're in the water world, if you're going to be in the, you can be on the side in the financial part, or you can be, different parts. But if you're talking about like the engineering kind of part of the world, the engineering degree is it has been pretty important. It's becoming less important as we start to move to the fringes of the business with like green infrastructure, and then landscape architect becomes important, city planning becomes important, a whole bunch of other things. But licensing is key. To get your PE, get your whatever the
PG.
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 Come
Thank
on,
you,
Greg.
Corey.
PG.
Come on, I said
PG.
it.
PG.
Just like you guys now.
These are all critical steps, and you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it before you get a job, obviously, but you need to do it. You should do it in your as soon as you can, preferably in your late 20s, early 30s. Yeah, it's really valuable. I mean, just, I have not done one piece of engineering work in my entire career. I have, I truly have not. And yet having this PE next to my name means a lot. It means a lot to, I think it means a lot to other people, but it means a lot to me. It makes me feel like I'm, I am a professional, and I am accredited in this field. So is that, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Does answer my question. I think I'm
I have a follow-up.
approaching it from backwards. So I guess I don't have an undergrad engineering degree, as Tony knows this. And I did the master's in applied geoscience at Penn. And so I sort of, now that I'm in working, I'm kind of wondering how to weigh either, a full-time PhD or a part-time, accredited engineering undergrad, and whether it seems backwards or not.
I don't think it sounds backwards. I spoke yesterday to somebody on the line here who's not showing his face, Anthony Mariani, and he's now getting his master's. He's working full-time, getting his master's at night in engineering. Didn't get the undergraduate and had to take some backup courses, but yeah, there he is. I thought that was a nice way to do it. Many people, the MSAG program's great. And you can have a long and very satisfying career. It's kind of, it's a field that I've never really been directly involved with, so I don't really know a lot about the PG, but you can do anything. But the PhD, PhD is not necessarily needed for industry. PhD is needed if you want to teach, right? It's obviously it helps you grow and is a nice way to go, and hopefully somebody's going to pay you to get that PhD. So that's a pretty nice part of it. But to me today, it's really a master's degree seems to be to me the top and the bottom of what you really need for most jobs in the water world.
Hey, Howard, I'll just add perspective from corporate America. And Sarah, it really, to me, just depends on what you want to do as to how valuable it will be. Like Howard said, if you want to teach, well, then it's essential, I think, to get this type of rewarding kind of tenure track job you might want. But if you're going to corporate America, to the corporate world, my experience in the corporate world is that degrees are not particularly valued. I mean, it might help you get in the door for some particular role, but by and large, once you're in an organization, it's who you are and what you do, how hard you work, how, what kind of network you build within the organization. But the degrees almost stop mattering entirely. And I've had people who worked for me before say, hey, I want to go back and get my MBA. I really think it'll advance my career. And I'm like, well, it won't advance your career here because nobody cares, you know? So it just depends where you are and what you're trying to do. And that's my thoughts.
Absolutely agree. I agree with that.
Thank you.
If I can, I'm going to talk about Greg Cavallo without, and then let him tell me.
Should I get off?
And then let him tell me if I'm wrong. I remember submitting reports and stuff to Greg when he was at the DRBC, and he was reviewing, as you know, he's got a PG after his name, and I think I had my PG by the time I was submitting reports to him. And you know, so yeah, there was a certain professional understanding of what we knew and what we were working towards. And then, you know, as I watched Greg change positions at DRBC, he got more and more technical into a very specific, you know, type of work, you know, both data analysis. And then later on, I found out he was a super expert on PCBs, which were just really hard to understand. And so he, you know, as John was saying, he cut himself a niche in that, but that professional certification kind of gives you that respectability start. And I agree, and at least in consulting engineering and in consulting environmental firms, the PE or the PG or both are still valuable, you know, because it means that you've achieved a certain level, and then you can go beyond that. But we still, all of us have experts that have developed experts just through expertise through experience. So that's possible too. And then finally, Sarah, after Greg gets to tell me what I said wrong, you know, I think that you can go two routes. You know, the PhD could get you, you know, the teaching role, but could get you something in a research type of thing in industry. And if instead of a PG, which you can get, you wanted a PE, yeah, I think it is possible. It's a little bit harder to do, but it is possible to get an engineering master's because you have a pretty strong science background that could get you on the road to sitting for a PE license.
Well, thank you, Tony, for that introduction. I agree 100% with Tony. A PG or a PE, regardless of where you're at, is very beneficial. But this goes back to something John said. You know, you get into an organization, once you're hired, then all of a sudden, it's yours for the taking. I mean, I moved up in the DRBC because I never said no to a project, an increase in responsibility or something different. And I worked hard at it. You don't have to be the smartest guy. God knows I'm not. You know, you just work at it. You study, you learn, you listen, you surround yourselves or you acquaint yourselves with people who are good at what they do, and you learn from them. Now, if you have some big master scheme and you want to get an MBA on somebody else's nickel, then go to another company, that's fine, you know, and do something with that, with your background and then the business element of it. But if you're just interested in saying, hey, I want to be the best I can be, and if I'm no longer fulfilled in that organization, move to another one, work hard, take on the responsibility. I mean, we worked weekends, we worked nights. You know, the PCB TMDL was one of those, you know, all hands on board for 10 years. And it was successful. And I'm proud of that. I can go back and look at my career and say, you know, we cleaned up the river. The fish are a lot cleaner than they were 15 years ago. So, and Tony's right. People will look at you differently with a PE and a PG, even though sometimes it's not needed. It's just one of those accreditations that either get you listened to or get you in the door. But once you're in the door, you make of it what you will.
And
Greg, oh, sorry, Howard.
Greg, sometimes in that, you know, in that progression that you went through, you took things on and didn't get any more pay for it.
I'm sorry. This might be an anachronism to John, but we had 7 years with no increases. We just, look, if you're happy with what you're doing, you don't work a day in your life. You heard the old adage.
Yeah.
It was a great feeling. I have to tell you, one of the best career moves I ever made was going to DRBC and moving with Tom into the PCB and the toxicity world.
Right.
I will say, Greg, that I think there are always exceptions, and I can name you some, but I won't. But the common denominator among the people I know who have had the most successful careers has been they work very hard.
You got to.
And even in France, you know, where there's for some reason, some perception that French don't work hard. These guys work crazy hard. At least the leadership team does. And I would just say, when I went to GE, I still remember interviewing with this HR guy, and he said, "Why do you think Suez selected you for these programs, like the senior leadership program, the global player program?" But I said, "I don't know. I never even stopped to think about it. But I tell you this, I know I was the first one in every morning and the last one to leave every night.
Yeah.
And I also know that I loved my job. I just was very passionate about it. I wasn't doing that because I had to. I was doing it because I wanted to. And I think that was probably the answer. You know, I mean, also, you know, you treat people with respect. You have
No. All said and done. You know,
the
hard
thing that
work.
differentiates you is, you know, working hard.
Yeah.
But, you know, do it. I mean, if it can be miserable if you don't like what you're doing, I guess. But
yeah, I think that's I think the key is not working hard. The key is being passionate about what you're doing. And I always say that, Carrie, but 1/3 of any job is your passion. You have to have a lot of passion for it. 1/3 is expertise. You got to be good at what you do. And the other 1/3 is finding somebody to pay you to do it. And I think,
you know what, Howard, I have the John Freedman corollary to the Howard Neukrug theorem or whatever, but it's, you know, my corollary is that, yeah, all that's true, but in my career, 90% of my job satisfaction has been who my manager is, because I've had a couple, like, just people bad fit. I don't like them even to this day, but the people, by and large, the people I work for, are great. And, you know, it just makes for total job happiness if the person you're reporting to is somebody you're simpatico with as opposed to in conflict with.
yeah, all good.
Hard to control that, but
Yeah, but I guess the bottom line and what you've collected here, Rob, is 3 people, 4 if I include Tony, who've had long careers and probably enjoyed working every day. Doesn't mean everybody in the water field does, but it's you know, being happy with what you're doing does lead to a certain amount of success just on its own. I don't know why we all like water so much. I don't even drink the shit. Please don't let it end there.
Can you hear me?
yeah. Hi, Neil.
I have a question on the global thing, because I've heard you mention the Engineer Without Borders, and I know Tony had worked in chat for many years. I just want to ask, what does a career in water industry looks like in a global scale? Like, I think they need more people like us in South America or other places around the world.
Well, since you mentioned me, I'll just say that I wasn't making any money when I was working overseas, so that was a humanitarian thing. So if you're looking to make money, you don't go by my path. But it was something I was passionate about, and there is a lot of need, and often, you know, I will say this about my career: I did not make choices because of the money, but yet in the end, hey, you know, I got to be a senior advisor at the water center, and so a little bit of money came my way to do good. So Ben Franklin said, do well by doing good. That's a good way to go. But John can probably speak to the international water scene a lot better than I can. I was working in villages and small towns and doing water projects that way.
Yeah, and I'd say from a corporate perspective, if you look at the world, there are water needs in every single household, town, state, country. And so there are synergies, if you're a multinational company, you can develop technologies that can be used all over the world. You can develop operating expertise and practices that can be used all over the world. And that's been the Suez model, and it's been pretty successful. So that's a for-profit business model. But water can be a global industry for sure. And then, like Tony was saying, there's a philanthropic aspect to it as well. And I'm also involved with some water philanthropies that are working, maybe not in every country, but working in a lot of poor countries on water issues. So you can come at water from different angles, but certainly it's a global need that can address itself to a global corporation playing a significant role. And then there are all these multilateral, all these organizations like the United Nations, the World Bank I mentioned earlier, the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation, OECD, Economic Cooperation and Development, and they all have big water programs. So you can come at it from different angles. You can come at it from the angle of a kind of government, NGO, corporation, philanthropy, but you can still have an international experience.
I'll just add, you can do it from the NGO perspective also. Like I'm doing it with leading utilities of the world, and get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Just one word of caution about doing work in the developing world right out of college is that I had this lovely person who had a great education and went and spent 3 years in Africa doing God's work, and came back looking for a job, and basically had no more skills that you could use in Philadelphia than when she left to go to Africa. So very fulfilling, very passionate, great stuff, but it doesn't necessarily lend to a career in the U.S.
I will counter that. I went for 3 years. I volunteered for 3 years in Sudan and came back and got a job at Panoni. And when I commented on having to deal with village chiefs and community water supply, they were impressed, and I ended up working on a small township on their water supply in Chester County. So, you're right though. You're not, and then I did have to get additional experience to get my professional engineering degree. So, you will learn good management people skills going overseas on a volunteer thing, but you're not going to learn a great deal of technical skills in that setting. But so if your career projection is to have increasing income and be at the top of your game with your age set, then don't volunteer for 3 years.
If my career goal is making money, I don't think I'm gonna choose career in water industry, maybe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rob, are you leading this charge here? Are we just about done here?
If you really want to be done, Howard. I mean, unless anyone else has questions, maybe Greg or some of the chapter members, but we want to be sensitive to your time. So if you do really have to go, then please make that known.
I enjoyed it, Rob. I appreciate the invitation. It's always good to see Howard and to meet Tony and Greg. I guess you go by Gregory or Greg? Either one. Okay. So thanks for including me. And I hope it was somewhat helpful for people.
Great, thank you. I'll see you also, unless there's any more questions.
No, and if you do have some, you could reach out to me if you have something for me, or
Right.
I'm assuming you could reach out to any of us. I don't want to speak for others, but if you
Right,
think of something,
absolutely.
as I normally do after the meeting, say, oh, I should have asked that.
Very good. See you guys at the Water Center.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
to all our speakers. This was great.
Yeah, appreciate the time.
Sure.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.